Hey, real quick before we get into this one, on Sunday, May 11th, I have my first EBO2 tournament. It is a case tournament. We have 8 or 9 rounds of Swiss into a top cut. We have top 16 prizing. Proxies are legal for the new EBO2 cards and should be a good time. So make sure to check it out if you haven't already. If you have any questions, let me know and enjoy the video. Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and this past weekend there were 4 large online events for the OP10 meta of the English version of the One Piece card game. We've got 3 of them right now, both of the TAC Games online events as well as the Core TCG online Treasure Cup as well. I am missing the Play TCG online regionals right now as this recording, but I will be adding it as soon as I get that data as well. But from these 3 events, we'd had 13 different leaders get a top 16 finish across them, and I think that's really remarkable. Kind of shows how cool this meta is, and I wanted to just quickly go over those decks as we kind of end this OP10 meta with EBO2 starting in the next couple weeks. So if you want any of these deck lists and many more from a lot of other events, since we've been covering a lot from the OP10 meta here in the English version, you can check out my website, Eggman Events. We've got power rankings, we've got deck list tables, as well as my own staff and team deck list too, so you can check those out. And then quickly going through these as well. So for the tech game May Online Regionals, we do see like probably the least diverse pie chart that we've seen in this meta. We only had 5 leaders, with 7 of them being Shanks, 3 Teach, 3 Doflamingo, 2 Lim, and 1 Bonney, with Shanks being the winner. But we also had like their Treasure Cup, where it was like conversely like one of the most diverse kind of top 16s that we've seen, right? We had 4 Dofi, 2 Lim, 2 Purple Luffy, 2 Shanks, and then singles of Bonney, Teach, Betty, Marco, Smoker, and the starter deck 14 Luffy, which we haven't really seen top since like the beginning of OP08, so that's really remarkable. So we'll be going over that, with Lim also winning that event. And then also we do have the Core CCG Online Treasure Cup, which I think is moderately standard, with an exception of seeing a new leader in the top 16 is the Edward.Newgate, which ended up getting second. This is JCM's list, which we'll go over from there. But again, we just have so many decks that I think are viable right now, and I think that's really cool. So I also do have the leader breakdown data for the Core TCG event if you want to check out that as well. Pretty much what we've been seeing, where Shanks, Purple Luffy, Teach, and Dofi take up about 50% of the meta, and then we have still just a lot of interesting and I think unique decks taking up that other 50% there as well. So again, that's going to be kind of the easy breakdown, and let's go through the individual list. These are the highest placing lists for each one of these leaders. These are not the only lists that topped, or the only people and players who topped with these this weekend. I'm not able to go through all of them, but I wanted to say a big congratulations to everyone who was able to get a top 16 finish. Treasure Cup getting, their regional finishes too, for both the TAC as well as the play event, which we'll go over again as soon as we get that data. But it's just like there's just so much to go over in this meta that's hard to do so efficiently. So I do apologize if I don't go over your particular list if you did get a top 16 finish. Anyways, going on into it, we've got our first place list from the TAC Games Online Regionals, and it is G with their version of Shanks. I don't have a lot to go over with this deck, since it's been a deck that's been very viable, I think, from OP10, which is pretty interesting because OP09 it was just kind of relevant, and then now it's just been like super relevant. It's probably it's a contender for not only I think the most popular leader, but I think it is probably the best leader in this meta. If I was to be asked, I'd say Shanks is probably the best leader in the meta right now. It just can always win, right? And when you lose, it's not usually your fault. It's just like the consistency with the deck at times. But I also think that it being the most popular list means that it's the most common to top in some of these events. But yeah, Shanks is in just a good spot. You probably have your own opinion about it, right? I think part of the reason that this deck is a little bit difficult to play against too is because there's a lot of room for tech options and being able to play different packages, right? This one's more of like the red hair pirates, but not like by a lot, right? We're only playing 2 copies of Uta, so we're not like super searching with it very consistently. We have some event with the Kit Course, the Red Hawk, as well as the Mulgun. Mulgun I definitely would say is a atypical pick. This is something that I don't think people will be playing around as much, but can just get some really good clear advantage with this deck too, which I think is very, very strong, especially when we have so many like 5-drop 6Ks with the Marco and the Luffy. Even if we have nothing on board, we can play out the Luffy, we can play the Mulgun, and then be able to still have like 2 6K attacks or better, which is good. So I don't really have much more to say about this. I think Shanks is pretty good, and congratulations to G for their finish and first place finish in the TAC event. And then also for the TAC Online Treasure Cup, we have Neiss with their version of Lim, which means this is the second plus win of Lim in this format, which is definitely two more than I expected at the beginning of this format too. But the original build that was able to win was more of like the artificial devil fruit package, and this is one that's like a little bit more standard leaning, but there are some big changes for it. So first we have our 1-drop 2KB Apu instead of the 1-drop purple to be able to search out the fruit. So this being able to get some like niche usage to be able to rest a 2 or less does show up, I think, every once in a while. But also just the fact that you're able to use this if you need to have another card rested to be able to have some of your own other abilities, I think that's strong. 2 copies of Adeo, which honestly I think this is probably about fair. If you want to play 4 copies, you can or not, but I know this card is mildly expensive at times, but it's still, I think, pretty good in its slot. So I think 2 makes sense for that one. I do have my 2. You're going to see green screen like literally right in front of me. So I'm going to be using those pretty soon in some of my builds, but there we go. We also do have the Smoker. So I think this is a bit of an atypical ad, but the reasoning for this is that it's really great going second. On second, you'll be at these points where you'll be at 7 Dawn if you use your leader effect on 4. That means you can play Smoker for 5, use this effect to get 1 Dawn back, and then you still have 3 left to use your leader effect. So really just great for these like off, if you go second, it does help, middle your plays that way, and I think that's really helpful. And then we have Top Knot, just a great removal card, gets rid of a 4 or less to the bottom of its owner's deck, does have also removal on trigger, which is kind of rare for this deck too, and I think this is just a solid card for what it is. So being able to get some removal if needed, I think is helpful. And again, Dawn Minus doesn't really matter in this deck, especially since generally speaking we are ramping 1 card every turn and we ramp consistently. We can go Dawn -2 and it's not very effective. It doesn't hurt us that much either. So anyways, this is a build from Lim. It's been really fun to see this top in the OP10 meta, or OP10 meta, and then being able to maybe top in EBO2. I know that there will definitely be some green purple leaders that are viable in that meta, and perhaps Lim will be one of them. So there you go for Neiss. Congratulations for their win with Lim. And then we also have Purple Luffy. This is Jerry's build from the Core CCG Online Treasure Cup, and this is the second win from Jerry with Purple Luffy in the last couple weeks, being also able to win the Top Cut events in Peoria a couple weeks ago. So this is a seasoned player on a very strong deck, I think, in this meta, right? Running Blast Breath with if I remember correctly, he played a copy of Blast Breath in that event too. It's just another 4K, right? There's just so many times where I'm like, 4 Gum Gum Giants is not enough, right? Sometimes I'm like, which is crazy to say, right? I'm not able to find this card. I need to find one more, right? Blast Breath being a worse copy of Gum Gum Giant is fine because Gum Gum Giant is a broken card, so having a backup copy is really great. Tony Chopper, I think, is a great card in this meta too, being another card you can play off Luffy Taro, but also being able to just be a blocker is fine. I think also it helps in the Teach matchup where you can have these plays where on 9 Dawn, you can play out the Bon Clay and the Tony Chopper or any other 5-drop, and that just makes it difficult for Teach to interact with your wider board, which I think is really good. So I think Purple Luffy is great. We did see a lot of it top across the 3 events from this past weekend, and congratulations to Jerry for their second win in the OP10 format. So there we go. Next up, we got Teach, and this is Kenneth's version of the deck here. I don't have a lot to say about Teach. Like these 4 leaders we've been going through, I think are pretty standard. I think Lim's maybe a bit of an exception, but Shanks, Purple Luffy, and Teach are all, I think, pretty mainstay staples for this format. And the big difference with Teach, or like the decision for deck building, really comes down to: do you want to play this card? It really is. Do you want to play I bid 500 million? Do you want to be able to get the trigger effect to be able to get rid of a 6 or lower for a trigger effect, either KO it or turn it to its owner's hand? That's just an absurd trigger, right? And especially in a deck that lets you have so much discard potential, right? We have 1 off of our leader and 1 off of our stage, so saying that you can discard 2 cards a turn and get effects off of them essentially just means that you can be running some of these brickier cards because you can, that you can cycle through them later in the game. So I don't have much more to say about Teach. You guys have some thoughts about it, any knowledge about it. We'll see how it does into EBO2 as well, but it's definitely a strong deck. And again, it does get the new star deck support that we don't know of as of recording what it is specifically, but it does get some new cards in the future. So probably still going to be relevant moving forward, but we will see. But there it is with Teach. Next up, we've got Bonney. And so this is Dylan's version of the deck here. And Bonnie's been like like in a weird spot, right? It's a mildly inconsistent deck, right? So it's not too surprising to see it be mildly inconsistent in practice too, but we do have a lot of great tools. I do think that it's a deck that might be a little bit better in EBO2. I think it has a great matchup into the EBO2 Luffy specifically, so if that deck is really relevant, I do think that helps Bonney be relevant because it does have a great matchup into it. The fact that you just have so many ways to stun and interact with cards, right? This one is like a little bit more aggressive leaning, right? With the 4 copies of Carrot, 4 Cavendish, and 4 copies of 5-cost Smoker, which I don't see that as often. Top end is Hody Jones, Kid, and Shanks. So no copies of 10-drop 10-cost Dofi, and no copies of the Eustace Captain Kid. Like, we only play 2 copies instead of like 3 or 4, which I'd say 3 is probably like the more standard number for this one. So running like a minimum of 2 here does mean that we're more aggressive leaning, and like Kid is just for maybe like a way to buy another turn if your opponent's being a little bit more aggressive. But I think this deck is so great. I think Bonney's still going to be relevant, and it's, you know, obviously it gets some support in theory as well in the future, so we'll see what that looks like. But here it is for Dylan. Congratulations for their finish. Next up, we've got JCM with their version of Bonney, and not with Bonney, sorry, with Edward.Newgate. Sorry, with Edward.Newgate. Clearly, this is Newgate, and so this is, you know, a pretty, you know, a unique finish in this format right now. This is the only Newgate that's been able to finish in the English meta in any of our large regional and Treasure Cup events. JCM's been on Newgate for a long time. He's a great player. I've known him personally for a while. He's been on a couple Wednesday Night One Pieces as well, and Newgate is definitely one of the leaders that he's known for, right? He was also like, it was Newgate, and then it was Enel. He was able to get a first place finish at one of the pre-regionals in Dallas back in March, and then they took away the Kingdom Come from him. So he's like, all right, he played with Shanks for a little bit, and then came back to Newgate. So I think this is definitely a deck that he's just really great with. He knows the value trades with it, and I also think that this is a deck that's able to show up every once in a while, mostly because there are just so many like tiny adjustments, and it's a weird deck. The fact that you're a 6-drop or 6 life 6k, the fact that you draw a card from your life every turn, there's a lot of like little nuances that if you don't know how to play against Newgate, you get a lot of secret value against Newgate players as a Newgate player, right? The fact that we've got our rad beams, right, to be like a 10k, like most people I think can kind of know like rad beam math because they've been getting used to it because of Gum Gum Giant. But I do think that's something that you can, like, if your opponent doesn't know how to play against Newgate, you do get that free advantage. So some unique cards that he added. One is the Ezo. This is from EBO1. So this on play gives up to 1 Rested Dawn to one of your leaders or your characters, and then also on your opponent's attack, you can trash 1 card from your hand. If your leader has Land of Wano or Whitebeard Pirates type, give it to one of your opponent's leaders or characters minus 2k power during this turn. So what you're supposed to use this for is being able to help you get some removal, or like you as the Odin, right? You're supposed to use this as Odin and give the Dawn to yourself, and then you're like a 7k leader aggressively and a 6k leader defensively because you get the Dawn and you have a 7k or more. But Newgate can also take advantage of this, right? The fact that you still are attacking 7k the turn you play it, the fact, on curve, right? The fact that you're also able to get rid of a lot of these bricks in your hand, which this deck is running quite a few, right? Half of our deck don't have counter, so being able to turn an Ace, a 10-drop Goldie Roger, or anything like that into a 2k essentially by giving something minus 2k power this turn does help a lot. I do think that's really impactful. So because of that, I think Newgate is in a pretty good spot in this as an aggressive deck, right? We haven't been seeing as much Zoro lately in this late game, and so maybe being like an alternative aggressive red deck, I do think that gives Newgate a bit of an advantage, especially again if your opponent's not used to the power, the card pool, and what this deck does. You do get a lot of advantage. I'd be curious to see if he's able to get another top. I think he's playing in the next weekend with Newgate with some new spice, but really cool finish. Congratulations to JCM for their finish there. Next up, we've got Doflamingo. So we've got 2 of the builds that finished this weekend. We've got Thaihok and Nell's version of the deck here. They're pretty similar, right? I think the biggest adaptation we've seen in this deck consistently is the 7-drop Doflamingo. This being able to interact with a lot of cards that you generally can't with Jozu, and also with the Marshall, the Law, right? Both those aren't able to interact with 7 costs, right? Otherwise, you have to play like Red Hawk to just get rid of it outright. But I also think like in the mirror match, this can be kind of a tricky body to remove. Your opponent can only get rid of it by like bouncing it back with their own copy of Doflamingo, right? So it gets like a little bit of a weird value spot there. I also think in general, the only other tech card I've been seeing added for this deck is like the 1-drop Law Blocker. That does help you stay alive in some scenarios, right? The fact you have like another one drop you can bounce back with either your Law or Jozu is really helpful too. So, but I haven't been seeing that as popular across the board either. So, other than that, you guys kind of know what Doflamingo looks like, right? The fact that it's been around essentially since OP01, right, and then very present for the last 6+ months because of the star decks. Being able to adjust after Jinbei being banned, I think, is strong for the deck, and we've been, you guys kind of know what this looks like. But congratulations to Thaihok and Nell for their finishes there. Next up, we've got Usopp. So we've got Fettuccini's and Thundar's version of the deck here, both of them from the core TCG version of the Treasure Cup that happened. So 3rd and 4th place, pretty similar builds, right? I haven't really seen the Sakazuki build do well outside of Europe, so I'm curious if we're ever going to see that like cross international waters and get over here in the States for any finishes. But I still think this build is still very good in this format in general. Big difference between the two is that we are seeing the addition for the Stassi, this being able to use a card, just to, generally speaking, you are so good at just having bodies on your board in Usopp, right? The fact that you play a lot of 1-drops, but also the fact that your opponent doesn't want to get rid of your 1-drops because that just kind of generates you into more card draw, right? So Stassi being a card that helps you get rid of these 1-drops, give them extra value in the late game, I think is very strong. So I do like the add of that one. And then we also do have the follow me and I will guide you. So this being able to just look top 5 for a Dressrosa card is great, and it triggers off of life. I do think like if we are playing Stassi, I'm surprised we are playing this because we can instead like use Rebecca. To be able to, you could like use Rebecca, use it, search, and then Stassi to get rid of it, right? Instead of like using an event card. So I am a bit surprised about that. We're also only playing 3 copies of Colosseum, so definitely a little bit more of a spicier build with the ratios that we're using. But obviously it worked out, right? Going 8-1 with this deck, I think is really impressive. And I think Usopp is definitely in a good spot still in this meta. So it's really cool to see that. But I don't have much more for that. But congratulations to both of our Usopp players. And then next up, we've got the Betty. So this is Aaron's version of the deck here. And, Betty's, I think, is just going to be in this spot where it's mildly viable for a lot of this format. If we get the same OP11 format, essentially, as Japan does right now, where there's a lot of the blue and purple Luffy, Betty has a really good matchup into that. So that can help it be a little bit more viable. It's just like an aggressive pile of cards, right? We got a couple new cards with yellow in OP09, right? So the Kuma as well as the Karasu. I think both those are very great cards, being a 2K and blocker that you essentially can easily play off of life for free, which is really good. We have a little bit more of the top end with the Dragon and as well as the Revolution Army Headquarters to help us find some cards. We're also playing 3 copies of Divine Departure, which is an interesting tech card. The fact that it does get rid of an 8K power or less is very helpful, though, I think in some matchups to help you buy some turns. It doesn't have a trigger, though, which does help you or hurt you a little bit, right? Because you're so trigger based in a lot of this deck. But I do think that it can help you defend when you're not supposed to. Just the fact that it can't defend against your characters, though, I think is a bit of a hurtful thing for this matchup. Just because your opponent really does not want to hit into your life for most of this game, knowing that they're probably going to give you some free advantage by doing so. But I think Betty's is still like a really cool deck. It's cool to see that it got a top in this event. And we'll definitely, I think we'll see it pretty often in the future. We'll see what we get for OP11. I think it's a bit of up in the air with the new starter decks, as well as if there's any restrictions, because I know a lot of people have been complaining about purple Straw Hat leaders that have been existing for a while. So we'll see if that changes anything in the next couple weeks. But here's the build here. Congratulations to Aaron for their finish with Betty. So next up, we've got Marco. So this is Kevin's version of the build here, and running the more animal package of this deck, which I think is really cool in this current meta. The fact that we now have like 2-3 drops that just generate a lot of value for us. We have the Emporio as well as the Tony Chopper. Both these cards very, very great for helping us get into our board widening. The fact that they kind of draw cards, right, either by actively drawing cards or putting bodies on the board that your opponent has to attack into, so you get card draw that way, I think is really good. One thing we see this Tony Chopper 3-drop, I don't see this one played as much, but the fact that we do get to just play this off our Chopper is great. The only thing I think it can play is literally the Duck Squad and the Richie, which is great. So either one of those can be helpful. The fact that it's from your hand and you can play active. So there are some weird scenarios where you can play like just shut up and come with us to play out Tony Chopper to then play out Richie. If he was in your hand, you need to play that one more blocker. So I think that's important. But other than that, I do think this deck is great. This Chopper I think is fantastic, specifically in this deck, being able to give something minus 3k when we're also using a leader that gives minus 2k. Like you can just like make a lot of cards irrelevant because of this minus 5k you get across these two cards. So other than that, we've got the Ace, Marco, Beckman, and Newgate. The top end we do have with those. We don't have Sanji, which I think is fair for this build, and if we're playing against Teach, that can definitely be a deck that being able to establish Sanji is just impossible, right? So I think being able to have like this more like interactive early game helps us get to the late game to get some removal, and the deck's just been really cool. I've played this deck, or at least variants of it, very often, and it's been a lot of fun to find in this like kind of OP10 meta. But this is the end of this one. Congratulations to Kevin for their build with Marco. The next up we've got Reiju. So this is Ren's version from the core TCG Online Treasure Cup, and Reiju's I think has been getting a little bit more consistent towards the end of this meta too. I've been seeing a good amount of tops across a lot of events. Only one this weekend, but I still think that's pretty impressive for the deck right now. We do get a lot of support from like the Sanji one drop helping us with her consistency. I've been seeing a lot of people play also the Germa 66 Searcher as well as Black Bug, being able to use that to get some removal, right? This being able to kind of be like a 3000 worlds, right? But with just like a better trigger off of our life, and the fact that it's searchable is good too. Red Rock, I think people play a couple copies for, especially against the Teach matchup, even though that can be just such an abysmal matchup a lot of the times. And then we still are playing the Porsche package, because being able to Porsche into Ichi wins us a lot of games just because of the early game pressure we get because of it. So I don't have much more to say. It's a little bit simple when it comes to deck construction right now, but I know that playing Reiju is the opposite of that, right? It's a lot of involved, there's a lot of consistency, tools that you have to try to sequence correctly, try to find your pieces. And then honestly, I think Reiju, when you see all your pieces, it's a bit linear to play, but I think the real skill comes from this deck, from when you're missing a piece or you're trying like what's the most effective way to find it while not like losing out on too much Dawn kind of thing. So it's been really cool to see that do well, and congratulations to Ren for their finish here. Next up we've got Smoker. So this is Nicholas's version of the deck here, and Smoker I think has been kind of weird in this format, right? I think it had a bit of a strong start, but then a lot of people have been kind of realizing that, man, even though like we get 2 extra Dawn every single turn, right, the defensive capabilities of this deck can sometimes be a little bit lacking, or we just kind of run out of card draw because we don't really get any card draw from this deck. And I think that's something that's interesting for it. But this build in particular I think is really unique, right? The card choices are just again like weird for how I've seen it, right? We're only playing one Sanji, if I imported this correctly, which I'm pretty sure I did. If I got it wrong, I'll let you know, but only one Sanji. We're playing 3 copies of Carrot, right? We are playing the Smoker. We have way more top end I think than usual with the Ben Beckman, 4 whole copies of Eustace Captain Kidd, and the Monkey-D Dragon. 2 copies of that to be aggressive. We're playing Divine Departure, Radical Beam, and 10-layer Igloo. So we have a lot of defensive cards, and I do agree, right? The fact that we are so easy at getting like extra Dawn available, I think is really strong for this deck. Having 2 open Dawn to then have like 10-layer Igloo is great. The fact that Divine Departure is great too. Like we can play like the copy of like the mole gun, right? The mole pistol. But when we have like 2 Dawn that we get back anyways, like the 6 Dawn to play this card is not, I think, as expensive as it could be. So I think that's a great card. And it's really interesting to see how different this build is from, I would say, more traditional builds that I've seen either. So maybe this is worth testing out a little bit more on the late end, top end, which could be good. I think Smoker, like this deck is always going to be like mildly relevant, right? The fact that you get such aggressive power or defensive power, like the flexibility you get from that 2 extra Dawn every turn is really, really helpful. And it's just cool to see it work well too. So I don't have much more to say, but congratulations to Nicholas for their finish there. And then to wrap it up, we've got starter deck 14 Luffy. So this is Jermaine's version of the deck here, and definitely one of the more unique leaders I was expecting. We had Whitebeard get its first finish in this meta, and now we've got starter deck 14 with their first for this meta too. So I do know a lot of people are looking forward to testing this with EBOT. We do get some new Navy cards that I think Luffy in particular gets some great effects for. If you don't know what this leader does, it just says all your characters gets +1 cost. Then if your leader, then if you have a character the cost of 8 or more, this leader gets +1 1000 power. So I think that's something that's really strong for Luffy as well, being able to be a 6k leader defensively, being like a a black leader with removal stuff, right? Being able to get to Jack and Kaido late game, I think is really good for this deck too. We are playing the 1000 Sunny, so being able to get a card draw, and then also the extra cost with our Straw Hat crew. So if we have a 6 cost out, it becomes an 8 cost, which is great for these Zoros and Nico Robins, and then we also get our additional effects. So we are playing the Subaru, we're playing the Nami, the Brook, Rebecca, as well as the Who's Who, Laboon. Like there's just so many like good cards for this deck, being able to like cost reductions off the Nico Robin, Laboon being able to us get there too. Like this is a deck that I think was I think it's better with Gecko Moria removed. And the reason I say that, like the 8-drop, is because you were so forced to play that card because, if you played against Rob Lucci, they just got way more value from you. But you're like the Gecko Morias that this deck could produce were just so middling compared to, I think, a lot of other decks that are in this format. So I think it's great to see some other builds. I'm looking forward to doing some testing with this with EBO2 cards in the near future. And definitely one of my favorite decks to kind of come back to as well. So here's the build here. Congratulations to Jermaine for their finish there. And that's going to be it for this video. Again, this is just a quick going over of a lot of different leaders and decks that topped this weekend, but there's just so much different data and leaders that we guys can go over. You can make sure to check them out again on my website, Eggman Events, and that's going to be it for this one. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys are looking forward to as this format ends, as EBO2 starts, and I'll catch you all next time.